Numerous examples exist across the land of the destructive forces that we may witness, and we oftentimes see a land that appears as though it's been scorched by some very dramatic event of fire and destruction. Was there a time when the lands were actually bathed in plasma fire? And that's how we explain these dramatic, melted-looking ruins that we see. Or are they not ruins? Are they actually natural terrain formations? What do we really think when we examine this account of plasma fire raining on the land? And how does it fit into our 5 eras theory on this channel? In this exploration, we're going to examine the details behind the day it rained plasma fire. We've looked at the incredible sights in Cappadocia, Turkey numerous times, and we're informed and assured that these are merely natural rock formations that possess unique properties that enable the inhabitants of the area past, present, and future to simply hollow out these impressive rock formations, making dwellings that people can live in currently and in the future. Or is it possible that there's a completely different story behind these dramatic formations, these structures? We have to explain the fact that there are no doubt artificial inducements, the excavation of these unique dwellings. And the official history will tell us that this was simply the inhabitants of this area of Cappadocia, Turkey, making do with the implements at hand. But tell me, how easy would it really be to carve out all of these dwellings and make all of these dramatic living arrangements? Wouldn't it be more simple to construct dwellings in an open area, utilizing other materials available? How long would it really take someone to actually carve out this dwelling? Or is there a completely different explanation behind these dramatic ruins that we have, and that these are in fact ruins, the remnants of structures that were subjected to some terrifying force, the force of plasma fire? In our numerous explorations, we've examined the baseline theories behind the existence of the old world. We've extensively explored the mud flood theory, and today we're going to examine the plasma fire theory. Why is it we have all of these dramatic areas across the land? And it's most certainly not limited to the region of Cappadocia, Turkey. There are examples across all of the currently inhabited continents, or however you want to think of the land, of areas that have been scorched by some sort of dramatic presence. It seems as though we have other remains across the land, and whether we're in Asia or South America, North America, or anywhere else, there is no shortage of these dramatic sites that seem to indicate that there was something that transpired in the past that wrought destruction that we can still easily see the effects of today. Now, of course, the official history will assure us that these are simply ancient civilizations or older civilizations, and we have names assigned to them, and we have some sort of idea of what happened, although it should be noted that we do not have a continuous record of history in terms of what happened to empires such as the Incan, the Mayan, the Aztec, and so on. They may well have existed just as we're informed, or there could have been something else entirely that transpired. Why do we have these records of these dramatic civilizations, and yet we don't have the continuity of the records in terms of who actually created these dwellings? What are your thoughts and feelings when you see images such as this? Do you really think that this is just simply some sort of aberration with the process of natural erosion that the people decided to take advantages of and allow themselves to make dwellings and houses and actually carve it out of the rock? And what about places like Petra, Jordan, where we have this story or account, I won't say historical record, of wandering nomads who just decided to stop in an area and decided to dramatically carve all of these impressive structures right out of the rock? Is that exactly what happened, or is there a completely different explanation behind it? If you've ever been to Petra, Jordan, or seen it, you can observe the impressive and incredible detail within the structures. What if we have some other sort of combination of theories for what actually transpired here? What if these are really the remnants of the most dramatic structures of a civilization that we don't even have anywhere in our records? or we don't even refer to? Was it really nomads that just somehow left the records and then it was picked up by subsequent empires? Empires that the official history will tell us were corrupted and subjected to other internal corruptions that we can't even trust their own records. And yet we are reliant upon this historical account to understand what happened in these dramatic locations. Or if you simply drop all of these preconceived notions and look at these sites with fresh eyes, you can get an idea that it seems that some sort of incredible event of destruction occurred. Is it possible that perhaps these were original structures that did stand alone, and then something happened to them? That they were part of much greater structures and they were subjected to terrifying forces of heat and the concept of plasma fire? And what exactly do we mean when we talk about the very terrifying reality of plasma fire? We're well aware of the numerous other destructive events that come across the land, and whether we're discussing flood, a terrifying disaster that we deal with frequently, or rains or wildfires, we have to think of something even more destructive, the concept of plasma fire. Now, plasma fire being one of the baseline reset events, to where you could actually explain the complete and total destruction of a previous civilization that's not on our records and is not discussed in our official history. And suddenly you have a completely different explanation, another series of possible outcomes and mentalities for these remnants that we have. And if you look at the ruins of the Minoan civilization, if you go to the middle of the Mediterranean, and if you look at the other islands and see these examples, you'll find that it seems as though the details did survive. And why is it we have this disparity in some structures that did survive more intact and others that did not, if they were indeed exposed to plasma fire? And perhaps one of the theories could be we look at the durability of the construction material. Even going back to the southwest United States, with the incipient civilizations of what we associate with the Native Americans, such as the Anasazi and so on and so forth. Was this really this incipient civilization, or was it something else completely different? And what about remains in places such as Scotland that we have? It seems as though that the people all across the land were subjected to a terrifying force that they had to survive, and that many of the natural ruins that we see, wherever we are, whether it's in Scotland, the southwest United States, or anywhere, do bear witness to what may have transpired in the past. Some structures were constructed more durably, and therefore they could resist these terrifying effects of this plasma fire. And perhaps there were just simple areas of the land that were exposed to more plasma fire, and maybe there were some areas that were spared. Even going back to our theory about how there may have been regions that for whatever reason had additional resources devoted to them, and they were able to resist the forces of this plasma fire. So perhaps this civilization did have some forewarning of what was going to happen, and they took precautions. They planned to try to enable some pockets of their civilization to survive. And that's how we explain this disparity and destruction that we have. And how do we explain all of these locations, these caves that seem to have been cut out of the rock? Looking here in this stone forest in Peru, or these incredible rock forests, however you want to describe them, and once again we see these overlapping observations of what appear to be natural and man-made features. Is it possible, though, that all of these dramatic stone forests are actually the remnants of melted structures? It seems to be a very dramatic and some would even say absurd proposition. But yet you have examples such as this aqueduct, and even official historians and archaeologists will tell you that yes, of course, this is an aqueduct. We're not going to try to tell you that this is a natural terrain feature, but the rocks in the background, yes, they are most definitely a natural terrain feature. And yet you can look at some other dramatic examples and images from this particular area in Peru, and you'll see impressive remnants of rocks that somehow seem to defy explanation, or at least simple explanation, by the natural forces of erosion, almost looking as though some even defy gravity. What exactly are we really looking at, though, when you examine these structures in more detail? Did they represent something different? Have they been subjected to terrifying forces of plasma fire? Is this figure that we're looking at right now natural rock? Or is it the remnant of some incredible monument that was exposed to the plasma fire and had no protection, and yet we can still see the remains of details? And what about these other rock formations that we have? If you look carefully, you'll see that there's other detailing that once again does seem to have a very specific design to it, that once again is a little bit beyond the natural forces of erosion. I'm always amazed, though, at how many times we attribute natural erosion in a long enough timeline to explanations of right angles and other oddities. Now, of course, the mainstream will simply say it's merely a product of our wild imaginations, that when we look at something long enough that our brains will want to impose some sort of pattern. And that may be true to an extent. But yet there are too many examples across the land in varied regional areas that show us that there was once a very dramatic existence of structures. You can't say that these dwellings in these holes that are carved out of the land here back in South America are the forces of erosion, and we'll be informed that this is some sort of elaborate cemetery. Yes, you're never supposed to think, though, that this could be some destroyed building or the remnants of some very dramatic colossal structure. And yet we do have these remains across the land. And we do have to ponder different explanations for what this could really be. Is this really just some sort of elaborate pre-Incan cemetery? Or is this actually an advanced structure? An advanced structure that was exposed to the ruinous plasma fire. Now you're probably going to be asking, well, then shouldn't the plasma fire have completely melted everything? It seems as though there are different sorts of materials that are certainly beyond our current capacity to make now, and that these materials in this previous civilization that were more advanced and made by methods that are lost to us currently could have potentially survived this plasma fire event. Or at least not have been completely destroyed, and therefore we have remnants across the land. Why is it such a dramatic contention to even bring up the idea? Why can't we even consider the possibility? And remember, there are so many examples. You can find examples in South America, Asia, Africa, Europe, and yes, North America. But if this monument to humanity that we're looking at right now, as it was called, really is just that, an example, a monument that survived in a broken down and melted form from a previous civilization, then it completely changes the paradigm of our understanding of history. What is the origin of these stone forests? And why are there so many unique anomalies when we look at the rock formations? Are we really to believe that it's simply the product of erosion, of floods, and it just fortuitously constructed this incredible and dramatic site that we're looking at? And in China, we have the Yaodongs, the actual construction of what we're informed are caves out of the rock. And these are supposed to be dwellings that have been constructed and are more efficient. How intriguing that in China they even have a name for this process. Now, as we understand it, we know that currently in China there's some of the most impressive building initiatives, and they're even building cities that don't even have a population there. Now, granted, I haven't been in China recently, so I can't verify these events for myself, but merely looking at the idea, the concept that there is an entire civilization or dwellings that have been carved out of the very rock itself, and even some of these lowered areas that have been carved out of the ground. Were these all constructed very recently? Or are these actually once again the remnants of some sort of attempt to survive this plasma fire? That if you were looking to survive such a dramatic event with such destruction, this would be the way to do it. Carve out these lower dwellings and seek solace below the surface. Because if you think of the example of what the plasma fire was, and what exactly was the plasma fire? Well, if we go off of these ruins, if we go off the example of what these structures may really be, then it seems as though the plasma fire did afflict every area of the land. Some areas of the land were afflicted more, and therefore you have more destruction. More of the melting occurred. Imagine what a dramatic building this may have once been. Are we really just to accept the explanation that all it is caves that have been carved out of the rock? because that's a very easy process to do, especially during a time frame before there was heavy machinery, that people simply took their hammers and chisels and just went to work carving all of this out of here? What's really the origin behind these structures in China? Here we even see arches and a little bit more of a terraced pattern, as though there was some very deliberate thought that went into constructing these impressive structures. Has some elements of it survived the past, and what we're really seeing now is simply the remnants that have been augmented by some more modern implementations? Or is all of it that we're looking at the remnants of the past? Even here we have a farm that's actually been integrated into the caves. And yet you can see the different dramatic examples of what appear to be some areas that have been melted and other areas that have not been melted. And it's when you have this combination of these two observations that you really have to ask these hard questions. Yes, you could simply accept the hand wave explanation for what happened here, and you can certainly accept the fact that maybe, just maybe, there have been some modern efforts to build up some of these areas and provide some new structures. But yet, once again, when you look behind the details and you consider how elaborate and complex they are, and really consider the amount of effort that would have gone into this, how exactly can this easily be explained? Especially with all the endless limitations that we seem to have in our current civilization. And everyone always brings up all the limitations that we have in our current civilization. We have limitations on money, we have limitations on labor, we have extensive safety standards. Now, you can always say that some nations have more safety standards than others, that some nations seem to employ more advanced methods than others. And yet you'll see examples such as this, that don't exactly seem to match what we understand to be our present history, or even our present limitation of capabilities. So whatever the truth is behind these very elaborate and incredible structures that still exist to this day in China, we should consider that they may well be very definitive evidence of the remnants of a previous civilization that did survive this plasma fire event, and that these were structures that were part of a concerted effort to try to survive that plasma fire event. And once again, we even have modern single perspective diagrams that show us how these Yaodongs would actually be in existence. Now, we always have names, and once again, I find it interesting that we do have attributed names to these particular structures. Now, if there's anyone watching that's in China or has witnessed this, I certainly welcome the comments, and I would appreciate a greater understanding for what you've observed on site with these impressive structures. Because this seems to give us the story. It's painting a picture that there really is many more ruins than we're really allowed to be aware of. Why have such elaborate structures for what's supposed to be carved out caves? And I don't want anybody to think that I'm dismissing these. I actually find these structures very incredible and impressive. And also comparing and contrasting with what our past capabilities used to be to our present capabilities, such as in the past when we had the very dramatic Queen Anne Victorian style houses. Now, nobody builds these anywhere now, this impressive example in California in the United States. But apparently in the late 1800s, somebody had the capability and the desire to build this. And what do we build now? Ah, yes, we have our Second Empire container revival style here in the United States. This is the pinnacle of modern home construction. Now, of course, everyone will go with the usual line of, well, in the 1800s there were a lot of rich people, materials were cheaper, so on and so forth. But despite the advance of technology, despite AI, the best we can do is perhaps you could call this King Charles postmodern container revival style, because this particular structure is in the United Kingdom. And you can see there's virtually no difference in the one that we just looked at in the United States. So yes, our current civilization is offering this. It's a nice, cost-effective alternative. This is the pinnacle of our present civilization, with AI and every other capability that we have. That's the best we seem to be able to do. So what is this plasma fire event? We seem to have references to it, and whether we look at old manuscripts from the medieval time frame, or at least attributed to the medieval time frame, or even the biblical accounts, we seem to have numerous references to some sort of destructive plasma fire event. And Allow me to correct myself. I should state that it's not just in the biblical accounts, it's virtually in the origin story of every major culture and religion across the land. That there was once a time when the land was struck with fire and brimstone. Now, the stories in the accounts vary. Some say that these were localized events, such as the example of Sodom and Gomorrah, but there's other accounts that say that it struck the entire land. Rain of fire that utterly destroyed the land. And one of our most current fears that we have, and that's persisted with us over the last several decades, is the threat of destruction by nuclear fire. Now, whatever the practicality of that is, it's safe to say, though, that that fear does exist in the mind of many people. But how does it link back to this subconscious fear that we have of this destruction of fire, this plasma fire? Why do we always have this great fear of the land being destroyed? And of course, there's also the concept of hell, and what lingers with the mentality of hell and the fact that you are underground and burning in fire. Is that really what that's all about, or is that actually a reference to the terrifying reality that our ancestors faced in the past? That they sought refuge underground, and that while some of them may have been safe, it seems as though many others were not. That the means that they tried to implement to survive this plasma fire event were not necessarily successful, and that many lost their lives, and it still endures in the collective memory. And it integrated itself in the latest updates of what may have been the baseline origins of all of our religions. And now it's become tales and accounts that add to our collective fear. Our fear of this destruction by fire. But what exactly is plasma fire? Some sort of destructive event that did strike. And maybe we do actually have accounts of it with all these fires that we have across the land. And I'm not just talking about the city fires, but also the destructive fire that hit Peshtigo, Wisconsin in the early 1870s, exactly at the same time frame that the Chicago fire is attributed to have occurred. And what if it's, once again, another example of plasma fire? How exactly to explain some of these structures being reduced to total rubble? Now, once again, defenders of the mainstream narrative will say it's because there was so much wood that was in a lot of these structures. Of course, they never actually looked at any of these structures, and you have to ignore the account that you have of all the repeated stories, all the repeated myths and legends that indicate that there were times that the land was struck by some destructive fire event. And again, not just a localized event, but fire and brimstone raining from the sky, hitting numerous areas at the same time. And suddenly we realize why we have this collective fear in our minds. Why the concept of fire from the sky and complete and total destruction does resonate with all of us. And it is interesting, even people who don't necessarily have the awareness, if you will, of our modern nuclear weapons or what their capabilities are stated to be, it's still a fear in our mind of what could actually happen to a civilization. And we understand fire to be the most destructive of disasters that we could actually face. And the plasma fire event being entire areas that were utterly scorched by a wall of fire. Walls of fire traveling across the land that were hundreds or even thousands of miles wide. It seems like it's all just some sort of fantasy, and yet there are so many detailed accounts of this actually happening in the past. And we do have vast deserts and other interesting examples of how our land was completely annihilated and destroyed, and left to be some sort of desiccated and arid remains. And therefore what we really have here is the example of the actual plasma fire destruction. Why is it we have all of these artistic renditions that show us the very fires of hell? And why is this something that is repeated in so many different formats and so many different legends? And the greatest fear that you have of people is being immolated in some way, shape, or form. It also appears in numerous works of fantasy, the destruction by fire. And yet it seems to be something that has no limitation to it. And what's really the origin behind this destructive plasma fire? Is this some sort of punishment from a deity, as we have? Or is it some sort of attack by some other force that we can't even begin to understand? Perhaps an attack by the ancient enemy, an external force that decided to completely destroy the land. because it does seem as though we have a civilization that was aware of the threat that they were facing and did try to implement measures to survive this event. We understand that there seems to have been some great conflict in the previous eras, and perhaps this destruction by plasma fire is exactly how one would go about completely burying the civilization that they desired to destroy. And then, as the saying would go, it's a cleansing fire, and then begin with a fresh slate. You completely destroy the civilization, and you start by reordering it. You start by rebuilding it in the image that you want. Of course, we're speaking from the perspective of the ancient enemy, or the adversary that the previous civilizations faced. And then there's the other theory that says that this ancient enemy actually comes from within, that this was simply brought about by the very corruption of the once advanced human beings that existed in the distant past. Or was it such a distant past? Was this a lot more recent than we like to think or believe? How long ago did the Middle Ages actually occur? And why do historians seem to go back and forth on how human beings were during the medieval time frame? It's interesting to me how, in just about 4 decades of studying and teaching history, how many times we've gone back and forth on what human beings were like just during the Middle Ages or the medieval time frame. Because I remember when I started learning and studying it, most people in Europe, we'll use that example, from the Middle Ages were illiterate, and they had no understanding of their land. But yet, it's been revised. It's also intriguing to me that we actually have a bird's eye view of the very small town of Peshtigo in Wisconsin. Why is it we have a bird's eye view of some small towns such as this, but there's virtually no bird's eye view maps available of other larger towns or cities in the area? Something interesting to ponder. And how recent is this account of plasma fire? Did this really occur in the distant past, as we might like to believe? Or was this a lot more recent? Instead of this being hundreds or thousands of years ago, is it possible that this plasma fire event really did occur within the last 200 to 150 years? And you may recall when we looked at the Peshtigo fire, there are observations and statements that there seemed to be some sort of devices in the air that were actually spreading this fire on the land with the Peshtigo fire in Wisconsin. Is it possible that these same devices, these airships, if you will, were also observed in places such as Chicago and all the other city fires across the land? Is that really what the plasma fire was? And so instead of this being some sort of dramatic reset event that occurred in the distant past, and it's very, very possible that when we look at the earlier eras in our 5 eras theory, that what occurred in the distant past was a much more destructive plasma fire event. Then the more recent event that we have is the latest implementation of plasma fire. That it's some sort of terrifying, destructive weapon that is unleashed to utterly destroy humanity and force a reset. And so it does fall into the theory of the reset being more of an artificial event, something that's induced by some sort of insidious intelligence. And again, whether this ancient enemy is external or internal, it does seem to have the very forces of destruction as its primary means. In the rest of this exploration, we're going to look at some examples of plasma fire from film and cinema. There's actually a modern example of a plasma fire event striking the entire land in a film from the 21st century. And then we're also going to look at the possibility of the lost bloodline of the old world. Are there actual deities, or are these really more advanced humans? Advanced humans that, because of all these resets and because of this corruption, whether it's internal or external, that have lost their capabilities. And yet if we look at these human beings, they would appear as deities to us, or even demigods. I suppose it depends on your perspective. Let's begin by looking at this example in film of a plasma fire. Moving on to Knowing, a 2000s film by Alex Proyas with Nicolas Cage as a professor at MIT who suddenly comes across a code that's been unearthed from a time capsule from the 1950s. Apparently there was a student who had a vision or heard voices causing her to write down all these numbers. And when Nicolas Cage's character, 50 years in the future, actually uncovers this code, he realizes that it's referring to something. He's able to do the analysis on the numbers and figures out that the numbers are dates and locations and the number of people who will die in particular accidents. And it has every single accident and every single event designated from the 1950s when it was originally composed to the present day when the film was released, which was 2009. The interesting thing about this film is it again refers to prophecy and numerology, the study of numbers and the understanding of codes. Now, the film was not exactly well received in some respects at the time. It had, again, Alex Proyas's very direct aesthetic into it, where he really seems to bring reality and make it feel very real in the film, even though, how shall we say, very extraordinary events are occurring. Terrifying accidents that are happening right in front of the main character's eyes, and yet he feels like he's immersed. It doesn't feel like he's just some sort of exterior observer. This film also contains some of the most vivid imagery of the entire destruction of the complete land. Now, according to the story of the film, the sun is emitting a vast solar flare and it will completely destroy the entire land, the earth, the planet, whatever you want to think of it as. And these are some of the images that resonate from the film to this day. What I find interesting, though, is that some scientists said there's no way that a solar flare could ever come across like that. Although these are the same scientists that'll tell you that one day the sun's going to expand and swallow up the earth. And even though neither of these events have ever been witnessed, somehow they just know. They're just that good, I suppose. The other interesting thing, though, about the film Knowing is its religious connections and connotations. And there's always been an issue with trying to blend science fiction with religion. It happened on the classic Star Trek a few times, rather quite successfully, and the way the film Knowing ends is we actually see the children of the main characters who seem to be in an almost Garden of Eden setting. Now, you can view it in different ways, and you have to appreciate the ambiguity of the ending. Is it a science fiction ending where it was just aliens that rescued these children, and then once the earth, the world was destroyed, they were brought to a Garden of Eden? Or were they angels? The real interesting thing is that they could really be perceived both ways, and the dialogue of the film doesn't exactly make it clear. It is interesting, though, that in the script, the angels, the aliens, are officially referred to as strangers. And when we look at the connection of the other very well-known and perhaps most on-the-nose referential film from Alex Proyas, Dark City, you can suddenly see why strangers is a very ominous term. What exactly are these beings? Are they angels? Are they aliens? Or are they some completely different kind of life form? I think what always intrigued me the most about Knowing is it's one of the very few depictions that we see of what may be a more advanced civilization that even operates in a completely different spatial plane of existence. You see that their ship seems to have elements of the fourth dimension to it. And you could even say that the perception of these beings in Knowing, whether they're angels or aliens, is that they are actually fourth dimensional beings. So is it possible that they really could be both? About the only other science fiction franchise that you see that really tackled that head on was Babylon 5, where you had the concept that aliens and angels may actually be interchangeable, or maybe they're an entirely different life form. The ending of Knowing is perhaps considered depressing in the fact that we see that the entire land is destroyed, but it doesn't end on a complete pessimistic note in the fact that once again we see rebirth. We see a new start for an entirely new civilization. Now, of course, there was some criticism that was leveled at the film and the fact that the strangers, the aliens, do have a little bit of a flock of seagulls appearance to them, and that's true. But there's also some interesting creative choices in the fact that the aliens, angels don't actually speak directly. They speak without speaking verbal communication. A very interesting little detail. There's also some of the artwork, the biblical artwork, that's very exclusively referred to in this film. And oddly enough, you see the connections between this and how the film ends. Now we have to ask the question, is it alluding to other connections that we see when we do our own explorations into artwork of the past, whether we think of it as Middle Ages artwork or something from an even further distant past? I mean, what really actually happened in the past? Is it possible that there could be beings out there that do actually exist beyond the limitations of our three-dimensional existence. And yes, whatever you may think of the shape of the land, it is certain to say that we do have a three-dimensional existence. But is it possible that our spatial existence is even beyond three-dimensional? Is it also possible that perhaps there's some component of us, whether you want to think of it as a spiritual or an ethereal component, that's actually connected to other worlds, other lands? And that is really the central theme that we have in the exploration of this old world in film, the digital frontier. The digital frontier is really just an analogy. It is possible that there are other worlds and other connections. And here, once again, you can see Alex Proyas's use of the portal window, where one of the children actually sees the prophecy of the destruction of the land through that window. And compare and contrast that with the passage through the window. Also, when you watch the original film Tron, 1982, Flynn's journey to the digital world. And that was actually one of the scenes in the film where they really used computer graphics, or computer-generated imagery, or AI as we refer to everything now. But there's so many different connections that it seems we try to put dividers on in our present civilization. There's a very definitive difference between spiritual references and, how shall we say, real or secular references. It's not encouraged, and it's not really something that people like to delve into, that there may be overlap, or that these may actually be referring to the same events, the same perceptions of events. It's ultimately up to you what to decide and what to believe in, and you're certainly welcome to come to your own conclusions. Maybe they are just angels, and maybe it's all just a spiritual or a religious meaning, or maybe there's something more. Alex Proyas's film Dark City is probably one of the most direct references to old world events. In this film, we have a group of alien beings, strangers, and they're actually parasitical beings that inhabit corpses of human beings. What they've done is they've kidnapped a large group of humans and have set them up in this artificial construct, a dark city. What we understand these aliens called strangers are trying to do is they're actually trying to achieve individuality, because they have a hive mind, and the hive mind has limited them and may be leading to their extinction. The reason that they're studying human beings in this film is they're trying to acquire individuality. Isn't that very interesting? Especially when we look in our current civilization and fortuitously how everything seems to be operating against us from having individuality. Now, you could just simply say that's a pessimistic perception, and that may be true. But when you step back and you look at this entire film, and oddly enough, we see so many different things that are actually alluded to in present and later films. For example, there's a reset that occurs in this artificial dark city every day. In other words, all events are reset. The people that reside within the city are completely unaware that there's never any daylight. And there's one human collaborator, portrayed by actor Kiefer Sutherland, who is responsible for injecting these memories, these new experiences. And you even see that these aliens actually do that, or these strangers, or these beings, whatever you want to think of them as. They actually have the ability to induce entirely new memories, entirely new identities, and entirely different backgrounds for these characters. The very physical shape of the Dark City is changed every day. The very identity of every single person that resides in it is changed every day. And so we see in this one film this entire culmination of potential old world ideas that we have. Resets, the changing of the identity of people, the possibility of different outcomes. Even perhaps a depiction, if you will, of the ancient enemy, a parasitic race of beings that's simply trying to escape from their own destruction because of the fact that they are limited by a hive mind. And we go back to the explorations that we've done of how it's not very popular or not very advisable to ever depict a hive mind in films. We can even look at how the Star Trek concept of the Borg was changed when they went away from the hive mind. But when you watch the films of Alex Proyas, and I strongly recommend watching The Crow, Dark City, and Knowing as his strongest films. The other ones have their own old world references as well, but his career path is very interesting too. It's almost as though by trying to emplace some of these things in these films, there was a difficulty that these filmmakers came across. Now, maybe it's all just a coincidence, And maybe it's just because of the fact that there is a defined studio system, and that for whatever reason, here in the 21st century, the easiest way for studios and filmmakers to be successful is just simply to go off of ideas that have already been done. And of course, the people that are actually putting up the vast amounts of money simply want to stick with what's safe. Why should Disney take a chance on some director's revolutionary idea when it could just simply write a check for a couple $1 billion and purchase an entire intellectual property, as we call it? Yes. I will admit, I kind of miss the days when we said things like a universe or stories and we didn't use terms like intellectual property. But I suppose that's just the modern civilization that we live in. In any event, watch these films, have an understanding for the overlaying of worlds, of memories, of identities, of resets, and see that in many different details these themes are overlapping. Whether they're films about a digital frontier or films about the simple concept of parallel realities. And never forget the fact that these details are present in these films. Well, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this exploration. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Florence Cathedral, still dominating the skyline of Florence, Italy. It's nearing 600 years old since it was completed, and it's a structure that continues to inspire awe from all who visit Florence. Yet it's interesting to note that this structure itself was an unreal advance in technology, requiring 2 separate architects, and a very revolutionary process to build this incredible dome, a process that was repeated on subsequent domes, even including the United States Capitol. But what's the analogy between this incredible cathedral in Florence and suppose our advances in aviation technology? Another unreal advance in our technological capability. It's really striking to think of how far and how fast we came with aviation technology. Recall that our very first endeavor into flight involved the Wright brothers in the early flight at Kitty Hawk at the start of the 20th century. A 12-second flight. And yet not 38 years later, we were already testing jet fighters in 1941. What's the real story behind these unreal advances in technology? Join me as we explore the true account in terms of aviation has always interested me for a variety of reasons. The thought of flying through the skies at unbelievable speeds. And yet I was surprised when I studied history to learn about the Heavy Press program from the United States Air Force. This was a program undertaken by the United States Air Force, or at least part of the United States Department of Defense, in the early 1950s. The intention behind this was to actually catch up with a technological gap that was well known during World War II, concerning the Heavy Press program. Now, what exactly is heavy press? A manufacturing process to form and shape various types of metals to enable manufacturing more advanced components for various platforms such as jet fighters. And we understand that during World War II, the United States initially faced a technological gap, especially in comparison with the Air Force of Germany. And that greatest understanding was achieved through Germany's development of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. And so what was the real aim of this program? The United States apparently lacked the heavy press technology that had been about in Germany during World War II, and it needed to alleviate this technological gap. And this warranted the efforts of the United States to rapidly construct several of these heavy press devices. This incredible infrastructure and technology that was necessitated in order to develop these advances in aerodynamic technology. One thing I've always found intriguing, though, is the fact that the United States did not already possess these heavy presses. It's well known and accepted amongst the mainstream historical account that the United States was the best equipped military in World War II, especially in terms of the amount of materials that it produced. However, especially at the start of the war, there was a technological gap. But how exactly do we explain this technological gap, and what's the real origin behind it? Is there some sort of other explanation that we have behind the implementation of this heavy press equipment? And you can see that given its incredible colossal size, that it is something that definitely invokes our curiosity. when we're trying to explain how it's possible that the United States didn't already possess these heavy press forges. And because of the technological gap, it was only after World War II. And in fact, not even after World War II, but well into the start of the period of history called the Cold War, or the undeclared conflict that would occur between the United States and the Soviet Union, representing the Western and Eastern powers appropriately. When you look at this impressive heavy machinery, though, and understand its role in forming various forms of material into pieces that could be assembled into advanced aviation platforms, and recall that in the 1960s, we could definitely make the argument that the United States had achieved its pinnacle in aviation technology, with construction of devices such as the SR-71 Blackbird and other examples. We look at the original examples, though, from Germany, which, according to the official history, were developed after World War I, as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, or Versailles if you're from Missouri, with the use of these heavy press forges. So why was it only in Germany and not in the United States that these heavy press forges were developed? Why did the United States actually have to take technology from Germany to catch up? And of course, the Soviet Union also acquired this technology. In fact, there's accounts of heavy presses that were even taken from Germany and pressed, if you'll appreciate the pun, into service in the United States and the Soviet Union. How was it this technological gap existed at that time, though? What we understand is that with the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union were trying to alleviate their technological gap. This was done by acquiring this equipment and also acquiring the experts or the technical specialists in what had been Nazi Germany and utilizing their knowledge to improve the military capabilities of both the United States and the Soviet Union. The heavy presses were essential in formatting aircraft parts and manufacturing them for use in constructing these new advanced swept-wing jet fighters. The heavy presses had enabled Germany to construct the Me-262 and even the more advanced and terrifying swept-wing fighters that were more than just a design concept but actually existed at the end of the war. And here in this image you can see the example of how this heavy press technology works, starting before the formatting and after the press to build out the die cast or the other ways that you could describe the formatting of this material. Now the real question I have is, does this only apply to metallurgy? Or could there be an application of this heavy press technology to other sorts of materials? One of the main questions that we encounter in our explorations is, what is the exact composition of the materials that were used in the construction of old world buildings? Officially, we're assured that places such as the Florence Cathedral were simply constructed out of brick and marble. And this perception endures to this day with even the more modern structures such as the Iowa State Capitol, where we're informed that it's simply built of a lot of bricks. Although if you go to the interior, you realize that's not the situation. When you look upon the impressive array and the vast gargantuan size, though, of these heavy metal forge presses, or the various other names and nomenclatures that we have for them, and believe me, there's no shortage of different names for these heavy presses, what exactly was their true purpose? And how was it the industrial leader in World War II, with the ability to construct an incredible fleet of ships, didn't have this ability? Why was it after World War II, and indeed at the start of the Korean War, that this suddenly became a program with priority? Well, again, the official explanation will be that the United States was caught completely by surprise with the Soviet Union fielding swept-wing aircraft, the MiG, which apparently the United States had forgotten that it had encountered the Me-262 during World War II. And that's what required the rapid implementation and development of these heavy press forges, so the United States could rapidly construct these advanced swept-wing jet fighter craft. Now, this is all the official historical account. But we have to ask these questions: is it possible that this is not a technology that was just simply developed out of necessity by both Germany after World War I and the United States after World War II? Is it possible that perhaps this was another technology that was salvaged from a previous civilization? or if not salvaged, at least found in various states of disrepair, and eventually repurposed and repaired, and then pressed back into service. Again, if you'll excuse the pun. But why is it that this didn't already exist? How exactly do we account for the rapid advances or the unreal advances in aviation technology? I always found it very shocking in my study of history how quickly aviation took off from just a glider that only flew for 12 seconds to jet fighters in under 40 years. And we even have plaques that commemorate the Wyman Gordon 50,000-ton forging press. This is probably one of the later historical plaques that you'll see dedicated to something that was built in the 1950s. And I find that very peculiar. Now, not to say that any time that we have a plaque that just automatically means that we have old world technology. The heavy presses were inspired by Germany. And this was not the government that ran Germany in World War II, this was the Weimar Republic that actually innovated and utilized the heavy presses. The treaty restrictions of Versailles had deprived Germany of its access to iron. Again, this is the official historical account. And so they needed to develop these heavy forging presses to format other metals, magnesium and aluminum. And this is the official explanation for how Germany, during the Weimar Republic period, between World War I and World War II, developed the heavy forging presses. Yet something else peculiar is that the official account states that during World War II, Germany was not able to match the industrial production output of the United States. It wasn't even able to come close. And it was also outproduced by the Soviet Union. Although the official account also informs us that the Soviet Union required a lot of support, especially logistically, from the United States in terms of providing logistics for its vast armored formations or tank formations. Another peculiar detail is the fact that the United States during World War II engaged in quite an exceptional shipbuilding program. We've talked about the construction of the 24 Essex-class fleet aircraft carriers. Quite an impressive achievement. And prior to World War II, the Royal Navy of the United Kingdom was recognized as the largest navy in being in the world. But after World War II, it's been the United States. And it was during World War II that the United States rapidly constructed these incredible capital ships. The expansion of the facilities that built these ships in these dockyards is a stunning achievement of the United States during World War II. Although it's also interesting to note that the United States had begun rearming before World War II, at least its entry into World War II. So what's the real explanation behind all this? Was the United States just able to rapidly expand its industrial capacity? There's also the rather curious awareness of Japanese military commander Yamato in the ability of the United States to rapidly expand its industrial capacity. And the explanation given for this is that, well, he simply served with the embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. So I guess he toured all these dockyards, or he had seen reports that indicated that the United States would be able to vastly increase its industrial capacity. It's even more intriguing to note that the United States, since the end of World War II, has never indulged in any sort of effort to match this. There's never been an effort to rapidly produce this sort of fleet in a very short amount of time. The fast carrier task forces were something that were almost otherworldly, and they've never actually been matched in the sheer number of ships. Although it should be noted that the United States is the only nation that maintains its expeditionary military capacity with its carrier strike groups, as they call them now. They've had many different names over time. During World War II, though, the German army possessed quite the reputation for its armored forces, or its panzers, or tanks as they were called in the United States and the United Kingdom. The Panther, Panzer Mark V, considered the overall best tank of World War II. Although to be fair, it was inspired by the Soviet T-34, with slanted armor and a larger gun. The interesting note, though, is that while Germany possessed a technological advantage, especially at the start of the war, as the conflict went on, these technological advantages were nullified, and even the great weapons that Germany apparently possessed were no match for the sheer quantity of weapons that the Allied nations, the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, were able to field and put on the actual battlefield. It's also interesting to note how logistical limitations played quite a role in these conflicts and these major land battles. One would think that given the particular regime and what we understand about it that was in control of Germany during World War II, that the purpose of industrialization would have been one of its main goals. Yet when you actually study the conflict and you look at production outputs from Germany, they didn't actually reach their industrial output peak until 1944, when it appeared as though the outcome of the war was well decided. And yet the United States was already at its peak well before 1944 in terms of its industrial output, producing long-range bombers, tanks, and, of course, that incredible naval fleet that we've talked about on numerous occasions. Rapid expansion of industrial output. And like I said, despite the terrifying threat the United States faced, especially with a nuclear-armed Soviet Union, it never endeavored to match this industrial output at the end of World War II. There's also the peculiar detail with some of the colossal or gargantuan-sized weapons that Germany did actually develop and field during World War II, such as the Big Dora railway artillery gun, 800 millimeters, an incredible piece of equipment that was used during the siege of Sevastopol in the Crimea. The rounds being considered so large that it was very difficult to actually fire them. And yet this was a real piece of equipment that was used by Germany in World War II. Now the question that we always have is, why or how would any regime actually approve such a weapon if it was not going to be practical? The simple question would be, wouldn't it make a lot more sense instead of building one very large gun to just build 20 guns that had more of a decentralized capability and therefore were also more survivable when you consider the efforts that the enemy would undergo to destroy them? There were even larger guns and armored fighting vehicles that Germany apparently had conceptualized during World War II, such as the Land Cruiser P-1500 Monster. And yes, I'm pronouncing it very directly for a reason. Can you even imagine the practicality of such a piece of equipment? And what would be the real purpose behind it? Well, after the war, it was stated it was merely the product of a megalomaniacal regime that simply wanted to build terror weapons that would frighten everyone into capitulation. Although these terror weapons didn't prove to be very effective and they weren't very practical. And certainly when you look at the well-documented historical sources, that's indeed what many of the subordinate military commanders tried to inform the ruling body in Germany during World War II, that these wouldn't have been practical weapons. Yet another little interesting detail is that the German company Krupp produces the largest excavator in the world, or at least one of the largest excavators, with the Bagger 288. Now just imagine, could it be possible that this incredible excavator is merely a, how shall we say, smaller scale version of what may have existed in the past? If you ever pay attention to the excavation patterns from this particular excavator, you might notice that there are some much larger patterns in certain places, like for example Utah, that just tend to match its excavation patterns. Very fortuitously, I'm sure. And of course we know that in Utah these are merely the products of natural forces such as erosion, aren't they always? But back to that original question, why did this concept, this initiative to try to build extremely large pieces of equipment that are totally impractical from our understanding continue to persist in Germany? Even the Panzer Mark 8 or the Maus tank, which German Panzer leader Hans Guderian said was not practical because it didn't even mount a coaxial machine gun or any machine gun, at least for counter-infantry in close combat, which was the entire purpose of tanks. Yes, they were survivable being armored fighting vehicles, but you needed to use them in a counter-infantry role as well, and to support infantry. Why would anyone go to this extent to try to develop weapons such as these? Certainly someone would say they were impractical, and again the explanation will simply be, well, the regime was crazy. In fact, invading the Soviet Union was a crazy initiative. It had been done in the past and it was shown to be a terrible failure, such as Napoleon in Russia. And yet for some inexplicable reason, this concept, this nation that did effectively industrialize its entire military and did in fact have technological advantages at the start of the war, was suddenly put on this path of utter destruction. Although we could just simply account this being the failed decisions of a regime that was not stable to begin with. And perhaps we could accept that. It's always one of those great problems, though, with the development of these heavy forging presses, because it gives us the clue that perhaps there was a greater technological application available. Now, step back and imagine if these gargantuan, colossal weapons that were being imagined were a little bit more practical. It's also more than a coincidence, I think, that the current main battle tank of the United States military, the venerable M1, A1, A2, A3, and who knows how many other variants of the Abrams battle tank, was based on a design initiative in conjunction with what was West Germany at the time, the main battle tank 70 as it was called. And to this day, the Abrams mounts a German-designed 120mm smoothbore cannon. But if these incredibly colossal vehicles were actually a practical reality, if there was just simply some technological breakthrough that was lacking to get them to be a practical application, what if that was really what was going on? What if there was a time and a place where a vehicle such as this would be practical? Now we understand that our current understanding of the laws of physics indicate this would not be practical. It would simply sink into the ground. It wouldn't be possible to actually deploy an armored fighting vehicle such as this, and practical to support it. And imagine the logistical footprint just on a single one of these vehicles. So is this just merely the product of mad imagination of a regime that was bent on self-destruction, and yet they continued the pursuit of these initiatives? We understand that when we look at the very bizarre account of the technological advantages that the German military appeared to squander at the start of the war. Recall that the very first flight of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter occurred in 1941, and yet official historical sources indicate that Germany did not produce this fighter in any number until 1944, again at the time when the outcome of the war was well decided. Why would there have been such a focus, though, to produce these incredibly large armored fighting vehicles? What if there was a practical application? Some component of technology that we didn't understand and were missing? Something that may have existed in the distant past, that may have made these colossal armored fighting vehicles more of a practical reality? Then could they have really been the decisive superweapons as we understand them to be? The very odd account of World War II was that that's exactly what the conflict appeared to be, was multiple sides trying to pursue a decisive weapon that would give them an advantage that could not be accounted for. But when you look at a lot of these images, and you even remember the fact that there are numerous well-documented sources that there were large weapons produced in Germany in World War II. But by the end of the conflict, we understand that the Germans could not produce them in a large enough quantity to make a difference in the conflict, whether it was on the Eastern Front fighting the Soviet Union or the Red Army, or it was in the air over Germany fighting the United States Army Air Force and the Royal Air Force at that time. But we go back to that original question of the heavy forging press. What exactly occurred that led to Germany to discover and utilize these incredible heavy presses? The official history says that as a result of the Treaty of Versailles in World War I, Germany was deprived the use of a lot of iron, and therefore it had to seek other metals to use, namely magnesium and aluminum. And suddenly, during the Weimar Republic period, Germany, engaging in creativity, developed these heavy forging presses. In the very early 1900s, the Wright brothers, who by the way did not have a high school degree, neither one of them, innovated and developed the very first heavier-than-air flying object, and thus the first flight was recorded at Kitty Hawk. It only lasted for 12 seconds, although it did not take the Wright brothers very long at all before they developed subsequent models that could fly longer, farther, and higher than their original glider. And 38 short years later, the Germans had developed the very first jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262. Really think about that. 38 years is not a long period of time whatsoever. And yet we have thousands of years of technological stagnancy that the human civilization had been embarked upon. And this includes all the different types of governments and societies that we've had, everything from dictatorships to absolute monarchies to feudalism, all of which had been unable to produce this incredible technology. The Roman Empire never had any industrial revolution. It never developed jet engines. And yet, in a very short amount of time, from 1900 to 1960, aviation technology went from its very incipience to, dare I say, one of the greatest advances, or one of the most unreal advances in human history. Now, is that simply because during this period of time we were more innovative and creative because of the nature of conflict? Or was there another explanation for it? Horton Ho 229, the flying wing design by Germany towards the end of World War II. At the time, it must have seemed like complete and total science fiction, perhaps even understandable to be misidentified as an unidentified flying object. Yet we understand that today, primary aviation designs for military application indicate that the flying wing is one of the most advanced types. And again, remember, this was only 4 short decades after the very first flight of the Wright brothers with a simple glider, a flight that only lasted 12 seconds. Again, this is one of those things that really causes me to question our understanding of how exactly we advanced so quickly. Why didn't any other civilization or power prior to the late 1700s have an industrial revolution? And why was it not until the very early 20th century that we understand, with the treaty that necessitated Germany to indulge and creatively explore the concept of the heavy press forge? It's a very interesting historical quandary that we tend to have. And a lot of individuals would never question it and simply accept it at face value. Well, there were conflicts, there were requirements, and the Weimar Republic in Germany certainly didn't undergo any economic turmoil. I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. In fact, the Weimar Republic in Germany was considered a very difficult time. The conditions were so horrible that that's what had warranted Germany falling into its unfortunate path with the government and the type of government that it embraced leading to World War II, because the Weimar Republic had so many problems. And yet, it was during the Weimar Republic that these heavy press forges were developed and implemented, a technology that was so far ahead of its time that both the United States and the Soviet Union were ensured to acquire it after World War II and adapt and employ it for their own purposes. Imagine what the United States military must have felt when they captured the components of the Horton Ho 229. Why is it then that the United States was taken completely by surprise when the Soviet Union fielded the advanced MiG? And think about this with the swept wing fighter designs. And during the Korean War, as we understand it, the employment of the MiG by Soviet air forces and stated to be used by North Korean and Chinese pilots completely overcame the Lockheed shooting stars that were available. The United States quickly had to field the Sabre. And then it was during the Korean War that the United States implemented this heavy press forging program to rapidly develop, build, and employ these incredible machines to build the components for more advanced fighter aircraft. Now, it should be noted that in present time, other nations, to include China and Russia, currently possess larger heavy press forges. But is there something more to this account? Is there something that we don't fully understand about this technology and how it was truly acquired? Is it possible that in certain areas of the land that this technology was actually founded or salvaged and pressed back into service? And as a result of locating this technology and being able to repair it and utilize it, that it led to a very different form of events than what we understand. Because it's intriguing to note that the United States didn't really seem to want to retain its industrial capacity output of World War II, or it didn't seem very interested in it. In fact, here we have this heavy press forge from Germany in World War II that is stated to still be functional today in Russia. Now that's some incredible technology. Imagine this piece of equipment built in Germany decades ago that was moved to Russia and is still functional today. I mean, could we build any sort of incredible technology, a large manufacturing facility that we could move? And we have numerous accounts of that. And let's not forget that during World War II, the Soviet Union and Russia were the masters of rapidly relocating heavy industry because apparently it was just that easy to do. Now, is that what really happened? Or do we have an entirely different account of events that we may not necessarily be aware of? It's ultimately up to you to decide, but I've always found the historical account of the advances of technology to be very unreal from 1900 onward. It's not to say that it's not possible, it's just to say that it seems very unlikely. Remember that during this time frame, the real key to success would be to use proven technological capabilities to rapidly produce that which could be quickly used during conflict and overwhelm your enemy. Of course, we have this very strange overlap of both innovation and creativity. Now, I don't know what the real answer is, but it's intrigued me for a very long period of time. And I'll admit that it's something that interested me long before I developed the mindset that I have right now. I'm not here to tell you exactly what to think, but I invite you to let me know what you think in the comments. What's the real story behind this technological advancement that we had and our rapid implementation of aviation advances? Let me know what you think in the comments. The intention behind this exploration is I'm following up on some of the early explorations that we did on the Industrial Revolution. Although we have multiple revolutions. We have the Industrial Revolution and we have the Technological Revolution. Well, what's the difference? Well, when you go off of the quote-unquote historiosity or the history behind it, you'll find that the Industrial Revolution is the catch-all explanation of a time frame. Depending on what nation you're in, it varies. If you're in the United Kingdom, or what's today the United Kingdom, it started in the 1700s. If you're in the United States, it was primarily in the early 1800s, although that was the first Industrial Revolution, not to be confused with the second Industrial Revolution. That's also called the Technological Revolution. So you can see that we have many names behind many different things. And we start by considering the Industrial and the Technological Revolution because it is the official historical explanation for how our civilization went from a state of technological stagnancy, or being stuck, despite the fact that the Romans were able to do some really impressive things. And even before this Industrial Revolution, we know that many other places, such as Florence, Bologna, Italy, did some very impressive things. Again, according to the official historical account, we explain the fact that the rest of the world went through this incredible revolution, and that's why we have the wondrous, incredible modern world that we do today. And what we're looking at right here in this particular image is the Barrow Steel Works. And this was part of the Second Industrial Revolution, or the Technological Revolution. Yes, it makes history simple when you have multiple names for the same period or the same era. I always found that rather comical. But in any event, the Barrow Steel Works. So we're looking at something that was developed and built, and you can see what an epic complex it is. Multiple smokestacks, incredible old world structures, and even a nice little fancy tower and an administration building, just the kind of stuff that you need, and was very easy to build in the 1800s. Whatever the story behind it, the official account says that this was when they started to standardize the production of steel, something that was required for the construction of the great technological implements that began the 20th century or the 1900s, and were put to use during both Great World Wars and the many subsequent regional conflicts that followed throughout the 1900s. But the Barrow Steelwork, impressive facility. But going back to the original Industrial Revolution, how do we explain it? Well, you might recall that they had the development of the Agricultural Revolution. And of course, this started in Great Britain, United Kingdom as well. So interestingly enough, the origin of these revolutions is all in the United Kingdom. And yet apparently the other nations managed to acquire this technology or this insider information and take it further, such as the United States' rapid development of the railway. But what we have here is the screw-cutting lathe, one of the very first basic machine tools that was developed at the end of the 1700s in the United Kingdom. Look around you. Can you construct some kind of rudimentary lathe? If anybody knows what film that's from, I'm impressed. But this was the basic machine tool that started the other machine tools and enabled the eventual standardization of production. So that's what the official historical account says. Now, from that, we also have the rise of the vast textile mills. That was another implement of the Industrial Revolution. So you manage to develop agriculture, and that's how you sustain your population. You've got more people that are surviving to the age of 30. Again, according to the official historical account, they need clothes, so you need textiles. So you need the ability to mass produce things, and therefore you have your textiles. And finally, you also have the modern blast furnaces, or at least the ability to rapidly heat and, again, part of standardization, have the ability to rapidly produce iron. At least that's what we're informed. And these incredible blast furnaces were the way to do that, the hot blast process, as it was called. An essential feature in metallurgy, in which case you could suddenly manage to manufacture these advanced materials. At least, again, that's what we're told in the official historical account. Although this is well after all of these incredible stone and mason constructions that we've looked at when these processes were standardized. So is it all to be taken at face value, or is it something to be questioned? I thought it was important that we review this account. But what are your thoughts on the Industrial and Technological Revolution? Queen Peachy Keen, quite very impressive, exactly, as it's supposed to be. So, KC933, how'd they make glass and whatnot before this? Good question. And again, it's something that's a little bit of a hand wave explanation, because you're absolutely right. The Crystal Palace was made well before the technological revolution, when things were standardized. Now, granted, you could make the argument that things weren't, or you could make the argument that things were standardized a little bit more than we realized, but, you're really balancing a fine act there in terms of how to actually explain it. And so that's what really makes it quite intriguing, because what came first? You have the proverbial saying, the chicken or the egg. Well, what came first? Iron or steel? The accounts are that iron came first, and then they managed to refine the process and produce steel. But yeah, Watchman says it best. Nothing new under the sun. Nothing new under the sun, because you're not necessarily inventing anything, you're salvaging things. And maybe that's how you explain this. Maybe that's how you explain how those upstart Americans got ahead of the British. Or maybe everybody was just all working under some sort of timeline. Who knows for sure? It's all speculation, because I did not personally witness it, just to be clear on that. But that's the difference, the Industrial and Technological Revolution. So now you know the official historical account, and know it was not a fun lesson to teach, but very imperative. Now, what you have here is the very first iron bridge, and I know British viewers, go ahead and destroy me for this pronunciation, because I've always wrecked it. Shropshire, England, constructed in 1781. And this was the very first iron bridge. Remember, 1781, so early portion of the Industrial Revolution, not the technological revolution that came after the U.S. Civil War. And you may notice that, yes, there's iron in this, but what are the main supports of this bridge? It doesn't look like iron to me, does it? Yes, it's more of that masonry construction, yet if we look a little more closely, there seems to be a little bit more of an advanced component to it, doesn't it? Don't worry, we're going to be looking at an even older bridge than this that's actually in the United States, surprisingly enough. And this is a bridge that you can still drive across today in Pennsylvania on a highway. But this is considered the first iron bridge in England, constructed 1781. And so that's really the explanation that we have behind the Industrial and the Technological Revolution. Thoughts so far? Oh, that's a good one. Concrete evidence. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello there. Hope everything's going well on the other side of the pond. And by all means, have fun with my pronunciations. I'm definitely not a Gordy. Let me assure you I'm not a Gordy. So, hey, New West Reset. Good to see you. If I didn't say hi already. So, oh, that's a good one, Michael. The rooster came before the chicken and the egg. You know what? While I know you mean that in a facetious way, I think there's actually some elements of truth in that. So, revolution is defined as a violent or forcible overthrow. Very true, Kitch. Very true. And yet, it's not limited to just industrial or technological processes. You'll hear all kinds of terms of revolution bandied about. For example, they have this concept called revolution in military affairs, and then they have the military revolution. Example, Napoleon committed a military revolution with mass mobilization, drafting large armies and then capturing capitals, at least until other nations figured it out, allied, and stopped him. So the official history goes. Did Napoleon exist? I don't know, I wasn't there. Ooh, Sky Sage. Yeah, it is some nice lattice work on it, isn't it? Something that we really don't see with iron construction. I mean, yes, we have iron and steel construction now, but we tend to make it very utilitarian, very blasé, and yet this has an artistic appeal to it. So that's the overview of these revolutions. Let us go on to the steam engine and power sources, because you need to have power to get this revolution going. So give me one moment here, and we shall go to our steam engine, which is the essential element of the Industrial Revolution. Stop screen, start screen, share screen, and you should see this little animation right here. Isn't this nice? You have to love these little animated GIFs showing you exactly how the steam engine works in action with the giant wheel. No, never too late at all. So that lattice is what finite element analysis algorithms now call automated topology, based on stress strain properties of material. Indeed. You know what the other thing you see there, Aether Topo Billy, is you tend to get a lot of terminology that gets layered on top of things, no matter what discipline we're actually talking about. That's something else that I try to make a lot of a study on, and try to understand how things are layered. What's the origin of terms? Why do we pronounce things the way that we do? Because a lot of people are keen about pronunciations. Oh, RB, yes, Looney Tunes taught me about steam engines. You and me both. And yes, they had some great ways of showing it in cartoons. So anyway, so the steam engine, how to develop the power source. Well, what's the actual history behind these very incredible steam engines? How exactly do they work? Why do they work? Does anybody know when the first steam engine was invented? At least the first thing that we consider the steam engine. And if you've watched some explorations before, you probably know the answer to this question. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't during the Industrial Revolution. Well, atom bomb. Linguistics is layered just like our infrastructure. Yes, and much like our historical accounts, our politics, our corporate methods of operation, everything is nice and layered, isn't it? It all makes perfect sense. Keep it simple. Our history academia shows us a forced takeover, says Kitch. Absolutely right. So anyway, getting back to the original question, how exactly did this all start? You have the Aeolopile, back from, yes, you guessed it, that time before. I'm surprised they don't attribute this to Eratosthenes or Aristophanes, or however we're pronouncing his name today. You know, the guy who figured out the circumference of the world back before the Library of Alexandria was burned. So again, this is attributed to those Hellenistic times, and the concept of the steam engine has been with us for 2,000 years, 1,900 years, depending what historical sources you look at. Now, yes, this is just a drawing, but apparently they had this design for a very long time. The very rudimentary steam engine. And not some guy in Galaxy Quest saying you need to build a rudimentary steam engine to get off the alien planet before the rock monster kills you. There, I gave you a hint to that quote from earlier. This is apparently a practical model of it. But I find it fascinating that the official historical account tells us that we had a rudimentary steam engine from the time of the library in Alexandria. Now, when exactly was this? Who knows? Yes, official historical accounts say 1 AD, 1 BC, whatever time frame you want to look at. I mean, the whole thing is circa anyway, so how they could possibly know this, especially after the Library of Alexandria was burned, which always leaves that question, how exactly did they find Eratosthenes' work? But never mind that. They said they did. Who are we to question it, right? But they had this rudimentary steam engine for hundreds of years, but no kind of technological revolution at that time. The Romans never employed a steam engine, according to official history. They built this incredible empire. They had all these incredible domes and columns, but never developed a steam engine, never achieved any kind of industrial revolution. Yes, of course, it's some great speculation and alternate history if they did. But you look at how the steam engine just really languished in, what we might consider development hell. We've got many films that are in development hell these days, and apparently the steam engine languished in technological development hell for hundreds of years. Now, gradually in the 1700s, again, things all starting to overlap, they began to implement some improvements. Different inventors from completely different areas, although most of them from the United Kingdom or Great Britain at the time, they were the ones who apparently started to refine the steam engine. Until finally we come across this particular individual, Richard Trevithick, or Trevithick, depending on how you pronounce his name. And here it looks like he's pointing in the distance there. I'm going to run a railway track over that hill because that's an easy thing to do. Never mind James May's presentation on tractive force and why it's very difficult for trains to go up hills. But apparently he was the one, according to the official historical account in the early 1800s, he invented the first steam engine, the first locomotion. And here you can see he had this little steam circus, as he called it, where he was trying to showcase that the steam engine that he had invented could be faster than a horse. And they charged admission for this, but apparently it wasn't a very successful event. And he was discouraged and off he went. But still, he was attributed as the first person who invented this thing. Of course, right? Okay, Chassis, that's got to be the comment of the night right there. Well, you always have these individuals, these incredible revolutionary thinkers who come out of the blue and they come up with all these new concepts for locomotion and other means of transportation. So, Mr. Wynn there, don't look successful. Yeah, precisely. There you go, Adam Bomb. Yeah, what's that over there? Just take a look. Anyways, so that's the official account behind it, and here you're looking at a drawing of the initial high-pressure steam engine that he invented, and this was from refining the earlier designs that had just been sitting around throughout hundreds of years and improving it. Now, I will give a little bit of credit here, though, or maybe I should say a little bit of less skepticism. This almost seems like it's a more credible story, a more credible account that, yes, they slowly developed the steam engine over time. But as usual, they never went anywhere with it until the 1800s, that magical century when anything and everything could be done and achieved. Now, unfortunately, good old Richard, he passed away, and much like our good friend, no, I'm not going to say his name, but, our previous friend, Nikolai Tesla, Richard ended up dying in a hotel. He was penniless, just like Tesla, but he's still very well remembered. And even though they were penniless, both of them managed to stay in a hotel. So I don't know, maybe because they were so famous, they were offered free hotel accommodations. I'm not really sure. But Richard's got this nice little plaque here that commemorates his contributions to technology, and he's not forgotten. The great engineer and pioneer of high-pressure steam. We've got I don't know if you'd even call this a plaque. This actually looks like a concrete piece that's been inscribed upon. So a little bit more than a plaque. So, maybe they do hold him in high regard. But, just like Nikola Tesla, he died, and although granted Tesla was penniless too, but he got a big state funeral. So, I don't know. How unknown was he? Depends on who you ask. So that's the story behind the steam engine, and then they've got this really nice statue of him. Well, he looks so impressive there with his one arm forward, and, oh, look at that, he's got his leggings on and his really nifty shoes. Nice old world buildings behind him too. It's quite the statue. But, the pioneer, the innovator. And then we have to go later in the 1800s, though, before we continue to refine it. Now, there were other refinements to the steam engine for power sources, but we have to go to 1884 with this individual, Charles Algernon Parsons, another incredible British inventor. And in 1884, he was the one who put together the modern steam turbine, the steam turbine that we still use to this day. Now, this is an actual steam turbine that he constructed for the community of Elberfeld in Germany in 1900. Now, this is very peculiar if you step back and you look at what was historically going on at that time. In 1900, you had the German Empire and you had the British Empire, and they were in a state of competition. You had this little thing going on called colonization for competing for minimal resources in Africa, so the official account says. You had these nations in an arms race at that time, and then eventually World War I would break out. You had the Kaiser, and he was not too fond of the British monarchy, and so on and so forth. So there's conflicting accounts. There's accounts that said that they were in an arms race, but then they tried to make diplomatic processes. It doesn't make any sense, though, for Britain or the United Kingdom or the British Empire to actually provide somebody to build a 1 megawatt generator for a town in the German Empire in 1900. It really doesn't. It would sort of be like if the United States invented some new technological device and then said, yes, we're going to go build this in China or Russia or North Korea. That's an even better example. And we're just going to do it here now. Of course, the United States would actually have to invent something that's revolutionary right now. And, we just aren't doing it right now. Well, maybe we'll get around to it. But anyways, back to the historical example. It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you step back and you put it in the so-called historical context. There you go, Sky Sage. Wow, exactly. Just out of nowhere, the steam turbine refined from nothing. The sheer size of the iron castings from those times is quite disturbing. It's a good point there, Reno. And we'll take a look at some of the scale of this construction that they had as well. So, Sean, they conjured it from nowhere, but nothing before that for thousands of years. Exactly. It's a familiar theme. You can really just use that to describe the entire 1800s. Conjured from nowhere, from nothing for hundreds or thousands of years. That's the 1800s in a lot of ways. And so this is the same model of the turbine that is used to this day. This is a steam turbine at a nuclear plant. Now, whatever your thoughts on nuclear power, and you can certainly watch the miniseries Chernobyl and listen to Professor Legasov tell Boris exactly how a nuclear power plant works, but it all still revolves around steam turbines. The same steam turbines that came from good old Mr. Charles Parsons, not of Alan Parsons' project. But yeah, he's a very intelligent-looking individual. I like the glasses too, and not slamming about the massive amounts of facial hair like Americans did in the U.S. Civil War. But he was a refined gentleman, I guess. Now, this also led to the revolution in shipbuilding. Now, you might recall that in the 1800s, and we'll look at shipbuilding a little bit more closely because that's the other thing that's interesting about this. This is Her Majesty's ship, the Dreadnought. Finished, constructed, and launched circa 1906. And I say circa because I don't know. That's what the official historical account says. But this is really the first modern warship. And in fact, modern warships to this day continue to follow this design. Now, granted, they say that the battleship is obsolete because of the aircraft carrier. But you think about what a revolution this really was. What a change in design this was from just a few years before this. They still had cannons. I mean, the Civil War was only 40 years before this when they were using ironclads and cannons. But because of these turbines that Parsons had designed, they were able to drive incredibly large ships like this at reasonable speeds. Now, yeah, you're talking low 20 knots, not very fast, but comparatively speaking, it was much faster than what had come before, all because of the steam turbine. And then there's other examples of it, such as this industrial boiler, the stationary steam engine, if you will. Something very peculiar looking about it, though, and if you walk around, you'll find that there's still examples of this older technology, still intact. I mean, imagine our modern technology. I mean, what would we make a steam engine or a turbine out of today if we built one? It's a compilation of plastic and some other form of very cheap material, because remember, we're very, very cheap. We're cost effective. We have regulations. We have environmental considerations. They didn't have that back then, so they had advantages. That's the official explanation that we get. But you'll find examples of it. Here we have a pumping engine. I think this is in Belgium or the Netherlands. I'm trying to remember the exact location. But yeah, nice little castle building, big smokestack, and yet something about it seems a little bit more advanced than we might expect. And again, we never have anything in the Industrial Revolution about masonry construction or the vast rapid production of bricks, because according again to the official historical account, we built incredible structures such as that wonderful cathedral in Florence, Italy, well before even the Renaissance, to say nothing of the Industrial Revolution, so we kind of can't really say anything about that. They could already do it, just assume they could. You didn't need trains to haul around the bricks, you just had horses, and that's all you needed, horses and carts. Now this gets even more interesting though. So we've jumped around from the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s to the Technological Revolution in the late 1800s. But one of the questions I got asked was, when was the first automobile invented? The first practical automobile, to quote Lieutenant Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation. The individual that you're looking at here in this picture this drawing, or this painting, whatever you want to call it, colorized drawing, maybe that's the way to say it, Ferdinand Verbiest, or Verbiest, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and I'm probably not. He was a Flemish Jesuit from the Society of Jesus missionary who operated in China. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Flemish are an ethnic group in Belgium of Germans. At least that's what the official historical account says. Who knows for sure? He lived from 1620 to the late 1680s, and he went over to China and convinced the Chinese emperor that European astronomy and astrological charts were superior to the Chinese. In fact, according to the official historical account, he corrected the Chinese calendar. I'm serious. They actually say this happened. This guy who was a Jesuit did all this. And you see there's all these pictures of him with these very advanced astronomical instruments. Okay, what the heck does this have to do with automobiles? Well, bear with me for a second. So apparently he constructed this elaborate array of these unique astronomical instruments, and this is why the Chinese just thought he was the best thing since sliced bread, apparently. And apparently there's even a picture of some of the remnants of this incredible facility, this astronomy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, observatory, maybe. I mean, it's really, really strange to me. But, you know, you see a little bit of the amalgamation of technology. You have what you would associate with symbols in China, with the dragons and everything. But who knows for sure what's going on? It's just a picture. I don't. But he also had some really cool maps that he apparently produced. This one attributed from 1674. And you know how we like looking at world maps here. And oddly enough, this seems to be an accurate world. Oh, look at this. Once again, showing land up there in the North Polar region. Well, if the Jesuit was doing it, if the guy who helped the Chinese correct their calendar, because remember, their calendar wasn't correct until this Flemish guy went over there and showed him. Yeah, right. Anyways, you can see, though, that on this interesting depiction of all the land, he shows land up there in the North Polar region. Very, very odd. Also shows, well, actually, it looks like it's not an island here, because according to this, there's land that connects the mighty magical land of California and the United States. And I think we got some Great Lakes here, or maybe one giant lake. Maybe that was Lake Super Superior, and then it divided up into the other lakes. I know I'm having a little bit of fun with this one, but sometimes you have to. And then, you know, we've got all kinds of animals and critters down there on Antarctica. I guess you knew about Antarctica. Or you remember they called it Terra Incognita because Captain Cook didn't go down there to confirm there was no Terra Incognita Australis or whatever they called it, but he missed finding the Antarctica. So, you know, make of it what you will. Oh, good. I'm glad you appreciated that one. You know, sometimes I can pull a good one from the top of my hat. So, oh yeah. Yeah, Antarctic animals. I guess he didn't know about the polar bears or penguins. I don't think there's polar bears down there. No, I thought they were north, but you know, it's okay. Maybe there are polar bears down there. It's all good. But yes, this was the map that this Flemish Jesuit missionary designed for the Chinese emperor in the 1600s. And then last but not least, in 1678, he's attributed to have invented this original steam machine. And it's considered the first automobile. Now, granted, it was just a model, but apparently this guy, who was a Flemish Jesuit missionary operating in China, he invented this thing. And this is the first automobile. So, you know, if you're Worf, you can get in the holodeck and you can try jumping on this thing with your batleth and, you know, fighting the holodeck monsters. But this is attributed to be the very first automobile. Now, let's think about this. We just reviewed the fact that we had most of the implementations of steam power and advancements conducted in the late 1700s, refined in the 1800s. Yet there is also an official historical account of a steam machine by some Jesuit missionary in China in the 1600s. That was the first automobile, operated on steam power. The hell you say? Yeah, that's what the official historical account says. So what are your thoughts on that? RV. Wait, they were building whole star cities, but this was supposedly top tech? Well, absolutely. You know, and I'm surprised he didn't take that over as well, you know? Maybe he was just a little short on it, so. Oh, there you go, Adam Bomb. Yeah, trying to put it in reverse. Yeah, I don't know how practical or effective it was, but there are historical accounts that said that he did this, that he pulled this off. So, as always, yeah, there you go, KC933. Ah, shenanigans. It is shenanigans, isn't it? Huh. But what to really make of it? I mean, were they finding and repurposing technology in different locations? Was it a salvage? Yeah, not really sure. It seems to go in different directions at the same time. Yeah, chassis, and I mean, and it depends. Some classes actually covered it, at least back when I was still teaching, because it was considered one of the big revolutionary things. What's the origin of the automobile? In fact, I even remember the entire lesson plan on automobiles. The first chapter was actually about this thing. Wasn't a very long chapter, because it's not very well documented, much like the life of Roman Emperor Lucius Aurelian. But they said it happened. Why would anybody make something up, right? I mean, who knows? Who knows for sure? Reno, how did they refill that thing? Good question. Maybe you just poured water up there in the sphere and that's how it operated. Or maybe it operated on some completely different principle. So, not really sure. SS, is that a rudder wheel? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's how you steered it. You just kind of, you swung it around with your hands and that's how you steered it? I mean, no idea. They say it's a model, but very, very, very odd. And so that's the entire history of steam power, apparently. Yes, all back to that car. But let's take a look at some other examples here real quick before we move on. And be prepared because this gets even stranger. So, showing you these particular images. And what you have here, the interior of a power plant, transfer water from above the dam to water wheels. That's what they say these are. Interior of the powerhouse, High Falls. Now, this photo is attributed to the late 1800s when they had this kind of technology. And you see the steam generators, and you actually see the entire apparatus of machinery here. Now, where things get a little, how should we say, obfuscated or confused, was again, how exactly are you manufacturing all of this heavy equipment and moving it from place to place? And when did it start? Now, oddly enough, the timeline gets very, very compressed. It's a very short timeline from the implementation of this brand new technology to suddenly being able to rapidly employ it. And not just in a single nation, but in multiple nations at the same time, and pull off a very rapid standardization. Oh, by the way, they pulled off this rapid standardization when a computer was a human being. Typically a lady who was doing calculations, because you might remember we had the account of the lady who figured out the whole concept of different stars to figure out how far stars are from our current planet. Again, if you believe in that perception. But all very, very interesting that this is how it all started. Ah, yes, and the development of hydropower. Now, this is part of the great project for the Shannon River in Ireland, when the Free State of Ireland in 1920 said, we need to have massive hydroelectric power plants. And just to give you an idea on the size of this thing, you got a couple individuals right here. Now, granted, this is 1920, but again, a very compressed timeline. With the advent of railroads and being able to use rail technology, heavy equipment, heavy transportation, also consider heavy machinery, because the timeline on heavy machinery is quite constrained. They say they developed the combine in 1890 and the first steam-powered excavation machines and heavy lift capability, that was early 1900s. Although there's conflicts to that. You also have excavators from the 1800s. We'll look at one of those. So what's really true? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it is rather odd how compressed it all is, how quickly it all is. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm certainly not saying that. But I am saying that it seems very improbable. It seems very unlikely that somebody was able to rapidly develop and then rapidly employ all this technology in a very proficient manner in a very short amount of time. Just think on the time it would have taken to train different contractors or the people actually constructing these incredible machines, these amazing generators, and just get an idea for the scale of this. Imagine all the tech below our cities, cemeteries, and golf courses. Yeah, and there's probably a lot to be found there, Michael, no doubt about it. Ah, Chuck. Steam shovels were 1850s. Yes, that's exactly what they say. But what was really the capability behind these steam shovels? And yet, it's odd that we don't have accounts of steam shovels actually digging all those incredible trenches that they used in the United States Civil War. So it's really the mother of all conflicting accounts. They say they had them, they say they invented them, but how effective were they? So, how could they actually apply them? Newers, did you see those Alice Chambers hydro turbines in that collection? I've actually got something for you. We're going to take a look at Keokuk and that nice dam there because they've got some incredible hydroelectric generators there. Ah, Space Fraggle. Technology equals Prometheus fire. That's right. I could just hear you saying, "Give me Prometheus fire. I want it." Okay, sorry, not doing a very good Christopher Lloyd tonight. So, anyway. Hey, Wendy. Well, good to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Auto hoax. The Iowa Battleship's power plant is an incredible achievement. How fortuitous you're talking about battleships. We are going to get back to that. So, anyways, so you have these. And then, of course, you also have the more advanced lathe, because we went from that very rudimentary lathe to the more advanced lathe. Now, having the lathe gives you the capability to form metal, to develop metal shapes. And that's one of the essential features to building the amazing battleships, to building the amazing hydroelectric plants. Again, all in a short amount of time. Now, when was the more advanced lathe developed? Not really sure. There's conflicting accounts on it. Now, you can certainly look it up and you can believe what they tell you and not ask any questions about it. And you know what? Maybe it's right. I can't say it's not because, like I said, I wasn't there. But there are a lot of questions that it raises that are quite intriguing. And then you can find these hydroelectric plants that just seem to come up all over the place. There were many, many of them all over the land constructed from 1900 to 1920. And in fact, many of these hydroelectric plants are still in operation today. In fact, many of these dams that were built well over 100 years ago are still in operation today. You know, aside from the one or two that tend to fail, like the one in Minnesota that did this last summer and caused a massive flood. That thing was well over 100 years old. So it begs the question, you know, with the Great Depression and everything else that happened from the early 1900s until now, no one's ever thought or wanted to build newer infrastructure with more modern technology. We've certainly improved our heavy machines. And oh, by the way, this was done before the highway system, before the interstate system, before motorized and mechanized transportation, because that's how you would explain the last mile, unless you just want to believe you hauled this all here with trains. I mean, yeah, you can say that, but how many times can you say that? How many times can you say, "Oh, yeah, the trains just did it"? Can trains go uphill? Well, watch that video by James May. They can, but not very well, and it's a very limited slope, which is why I had to laugh when someone said, "It was easy for the horses to pull the trolley across the rails in Milwaukee." Why? Why would you bother with it? Just have the horses pull a wagon, you can go anywhere. What's the point of building a trolley on the tracks that the horses have to pull? It's a waste of time and resources, that's my point. But whatever, you know, maybe, but, you know, make of it what you will. It's like thinking of a flying bike in your head when the most technologically advanced device your people have is throwing sharpened sticks. Well, and that's a great one there, Break Marble Batch. It's exactly what we're expected to believe happened. Oh, thank you so much for that new West reset. I appreciate the memberships, and welcome to the new members. So, and good to see you again, if I didn't already say that, which I'm sure I did, but, you know, just be sure. And so that's what they tell us. Steam engine and power sources. That's how we powered this incredible machine. That's how we brought all this about. And how much of this was already there and we just don't know it? That's where things get conflicted, Anne. Maybe a lot of it was already there and we just don't know it. Maybe none of it was. It had to be rebuilt. It had to be reassembled, and they had the people that did that. So, hey, Space Fraggle. Greetings, Prime Explorers, and I'm just going to cut right to the chase on this particular exploration because we've got a lot to cover. And I know normally I do a fancy intro and everything else, but I thought this information was important enough to share, and I just really wanted to get it out there. So what's really the secret behind these bird's eye view maps? Well, we've looked at these on many different explorations, and we'll start with this particular one from Austin, Minnesota. Austin, Minnesota from the year of 1870. Now, if you do or do not recall the Austin, Minnesota exploration, it was a members exploration done, well, almost 2 years ago already. Where does the time go? And what's peculiar about this town is that it did become the county seat of Mower, or Mower County, depending on how it's pronounced for the day, in Minnesota, a county that's right along the Iowa border. And yet, when we look at this early bird's eye view map, we see that the area that's where the county courthouse is designated to be is just simply a park. It's marked number 4 here. And when you look at this, and you may recall from the exploration, what does it say? Oh, it's just the public square. Because that's what we had in the middle of these towns, was just random public squares, I guess. Because it's the 1800s, and, you've got everything built out and designated. And there's going to be a county seat there. Even though the official history tells us that it wasn't until the 1880s that they got around to building a county courthouse. A really nice one, a very unique one that really stood out, and naturally was torn down in the 1960s. But what exactly does this have to do with bird's eye view maps? Well, we understand, and you may recall that John Levi, if you watched his channel, did an exploration on bird's eye view maps, and he posited, quite correctly I believe, that these were merely real estate maps. They give you the layout of these existing communities, yes, existing communities after the reset, and how they're going to be designated and broken down. But there's actually some more evidence that reinforces that they were used for other purposes. And when you look at many of these bird's eye view maps, what you'll see down here, there's a stamp on it because they're cataloged and recorded at the Library of Congress. And what you have here is the date that this particular map was logged into the Library of Congress. Stamped and logged in. Division of Maps, February 28th, 1941. A good distance before the United States entry into World War II, but technically the Depression is still going on, although I guess you could say the United States was worked its way out of the Depression, being the arsenal of democracy, but a very interesting time frame to add this map of this rather insignificant town, especially at the time that this map was originally done, because what does it tell us about who really did this map? Can we look at this original artistic drawing and find out? Was it really done in 1870? And who did it? Well, it says right here, published by Ruger and Stoner in Madison, Wisconsin. Why exactly would there be a publishing company that would do a bird's eye view map in another state? And this is 1870, right after the Civil War. And, from the grand scheme of things, Wisconsin and Minnesota especially are still relatively new states. But yeah, sure, we got a business here. Somebody paid us some money. And we sent some guys to come out here and somehow do this very, very accurate map that was drawn by hand to show us exactly what Austin, Minnesota looked like in 1870. Now, maybe that's what happened, but I strongly question it. And something else I want you to pay attention to. On how many of these bird's eye maps that we actually look at do we see this stamp of when it was entered into the Library of Congress? Because remember, and I'm just going to say it out front and, not play my normal game of charades that I usually do, to some people's chagrin, this may actually be the date that this map was originally produced, or at least the day that we think of as 1941. In other words, there's evidence that this particular drawing was not done in 1870. How and why would somebody from some firm or company in Madison, Wisconsin, decide to take themselves out to Austin, Minnesota? I mean, yes, they could have ridden the train, and, it's a possible trip, and oh look, they've got a quarter of a roundhouse here. Remember when we explored that in Austin, Minnesota? Out in the middle of nowhere, of course, because I guess that makes sense. Why wouldn't you build the train tracks a little closer to town? You just couldn't do it. And the other interesting thing about this is, what's our main featured building? The public school, with grass around it. Yeah. And so what I'm positing is that these bird's eye view maps were produced after the fact, with the same layout of the streets in the downtown area from the original maps, but then giving us a different impression about what buildings were present during the particular time, to match a certain account that we're being given. Now, this is just a theory. It's still just a theory, but I think there's some evidence that really backs it up to give it the possibility of it being a fact. Now, let's take a look at the bird's eye view of Des Moines, Iowa, city we spend a lot of time in, home of the Iowa State Capitol, this one being from 1878. We'll go full screen. And you may recall this is where we also have a big patch of ground that was designated for the Iowa State Capitol, our building number one for all of our explorations. And of course, we've got this schlocky little building, at least schlocky by comparison standards. It would be interesting to see somebody build a building like this today, especially for use as a temporary state capitol. But we have this patch of ground that was designated. And strangely enough, here with the Des Moines River, we still have these bridges present. Now, are they the same bridges? Are they different bridges? Well, apparently we have 4 railway bridges, it looks like. I mean, I see railway tiles there and there. Maybe that's just a standard bridge. But very interesting, as though they needed to have all that traffic that could go through Des Moines. And you may recall when we did the Des Moines exploration, we've got a very questionable county courthouse, and then we also had all of these high-rise buildings, more that were present in the 1940s and the 1950s, as compared to what Des Moines looks like today. So another questionable thing. Now, what about the stamp on this one? Well, coincidentally, this being a different city, the capital city of Iowa, in a different state, it has the exact same date as the one that we just looked at for Austin, Minnesota. February 28th, 1941. Was somebody just getting around entering all these maps into the Library of Congress on February 28th, 1941? Did they receive some sort of guidance to do that during that particular time frame? Or again, is it another map that was produced after the fact, utilizing methods that were more available later? Now, something else you should do in your own research, and I'll just point you in the right direction on it. Look at the actual quality of paper that was utilized to record records in the 1800s. What the official history will tell you, or as I like to say, there's a nice little programmed loophole into why we do not have more documents available from the 1800s, is that paper was made on acidic paper, primarily in the 1800s. This is why so many documents from the 1800s were lost. Apparently not these bird's eye view maps, though, if we attribute to their actual publishing date. Now, does this one tell us when this was published? We presume sometime in 1868. Who actually made it? Was it some other firm? Oh, yeah, A. Ruger. It's the same firm. Everybody was contracting out of Madison, apparently. But strangely enough, it doesn't say that on this particular map. So it's very, very odd, isn't it? At least we have some nicer structures here. This county courthouse, which is very difficult to verify because you might recall this is Polk County, Iowa, and we've looked at the current county courthouse in Polk County, Iowa. Very intriguing. The U.S. Courthouse and Post Office. Rather modest building, but it still has a pediment at that time. Now, again, that's if that building existed as we think it did exist. And so these bird's eye view maps are giving us the indication, the possibility, that they were done after the fact. So let's take a look at another one. We'll go and take a look at New York and Brooklyn. And you might notice that on this particular one, we don't have any sort of stamp on when this was entered into the U.S. Library of Congress. Gee, I wonder why. But what we have here is it was printed by J. Bachman. Again, we don't exactly know who or what this company is. Maybe it says somewhere else on this. Oh, published by the agents A. Gruber & Co. in New York. Well, that's cool. They're actually out of the city that they're doing the map of. Bird's eye view of New York and Brooklyn. And what date is this attributed to? Does it even say on here? You know, usually they always put a date on it. Drawn from nature and on stone by J. Bachman. That's an interesting statement there. But of course, when you look at this, you'll see this rather exotic and early view of New York. Must be earlier because Brooklyn Bridge is not present there, is it? Or was it always present? Because oddly enough, when you look at the layout of Brooklyn Bridge, and while I'm not ever going to be a plug for Ken Burns' documentaries, seriously watch his documentary on Brooklyn Bridge. You'll have just as many questions about it as you do about the Civil War. And how fitting that we really can't see the rest of Manhattan Island. It's rather odd in terms of its layout, isn't it? And what exactly is this piece of terrain back here? Very, very strange. All these incredible structures that must be gargantuan because they're further in the background, are they not? So shouldn't they be larger? It's a very interesting and strange map of New York City and Brooklyn. I mean, look at what we've got going on back here. How large must this structure be? What is this structure exactly? I have no idea. It's just a bunch of buildings that are drawn on what's supposed to be a map. Of course, nothing is marked or indicated on this map. This is just a bird's eye view map, and probably not a good one that we would think of New York and Brooklyn. But it does reinforce the notion in our minds that these were the buildings that were present during that particular time. These were the unique structures, the churches, and City Hall. What is it? I mean, there's a number on it, but, where's the actual key for what the buildings are? Sorry, we didn't include that. Oh, wait, maybe it's down here? A time when New York was so small? Oh, City Hall. Well, how about that? Battery, Castle Garden, Custom House. But yeah, very rudimentary. We would certainly expect many more significant buildings in New York and Brooklyn taken together, even back during this early day and whatever time frame that this map was actually done in. Usually they're very clear about this. 1851. Ah, yes. So before the Union Balloon Corps was formed for the Civil War. 1851. And, official history says that New York City was the first city that reached a population of 500,000. Well, they certainly had the infrastructure to support it, didn't they? So let's move on from New York and take a look here at San Francisco, another place that tends to enter our minds quite frequently. And here we see almost a poorer quality map initially of San Francisco, or perhaps taken from a much greater altitude. And this is the one where it doesn't look like we have any sort of key, but we do have the entry into the Library of Congress. And here it's October 31st, 1928, I think. How interesting. Why weren't they all done at the same time or in the same year? Why is it we have such a discrepancy? And why is it the San Francisco map was entered into the Library of Congress before the maps from the Midwest? That's rather odd. Well, and the answer is because San Francisco was settled and founded and built up before the Midwest was. That's the answer from the official history, because apparently sailing all the way around Cape Horn was very easy for people to get around there and sail up to San Francisco. Because remember, the Panama Canal wasn't there, at least according to the official history. And, of course, we know that San Francisco comes up a lot in our questions, and we've got those very impressive panoramic pictures that were taken in the 1870s. But what exactly is this tower here? I mean, really, this almost looks like the Singer Tower. Very, very strange. All sorts of smokestacks, and we're well aware of what an anomalous city this is from many different perspectives. We have the account, the story of how it was settled and how it was done very quickly. Does it tell us on the bottom here what year this is? Oh, 1868. So really just before those very incredible pictures were done. Now again, yes, it's a bird's eye view map. What does it really prove? Because anybody could draw a bird's eye map at any point in time. Well, it's very odd because it gives us the impression that in a very short amount of time, they built a lot of structures in San Francisco. Because recall that in 1850, there really wasn't much of anything there. A few docks and a few scrappy buildings. And then not 20 years later, voila, you have a fully filled out, developed city. Nice cross up here on this hill. Is it like a volcano? Obelisks and what looks to be pyramids here? I mean, this is a really strange one. I strongly suggest that if you want to find some anomalies and mysteries to look at and try to decipher, the San Francisco bird's eye view map from 1868 might just fit your exploring needs. Now we go back to the New Orleans bird's eye view map. And we've looked at this before with the New Orleans exploration. And if memory serves, this one was done in 1857 as well. And of course, this is, part of the Louisiana Purchase, but New Orleans has quite a story behind it and a history of being possessed by the Spanish and the French and going back and forth. Oh, that's a nice little castle right there, isn't it? Well, it makes sense because it was Spanish architecture. Yes, of course. And you look at how New Orleans is laid out, and it's quite amazing that they do give you the impression of just how well built out the city already was. But, of course, the historical account supports that. The stories in the official history tells us that this city was built up, namely by the Spanish, a little bit by the French, but this is why it looked so impressive and so incredible once it was a United States city in the 1850s. Remember, it was acquired as part of the Louisiana Purchase. But I don't think there's a date stamp on this one when it was entered in the Library of Congress. No, there's not. So who knows about that? And how exactly would one go about creating a map like this that's this precise? You would think that they would be at the perspective. They're not on some flippin' bridge, and they certainly weren't on any bridge when they were looking at San Francisco to compose such an accurate picture. So it's all many strange questions and anomalies. But things start to get even stranger when you look at some other communities that you might be surprised to find bird's eye view maps of. So, as if Austin, Minnesota isn't surprising enough, we look at Sioux Falls in South Dakota. Now, we haven't explored Sioux Falls yet, but it's off of I-90, further west from Austin, Minnesota. And if you ever go on that long trek through South Dakota, it's a very long drive on Interstate 90, and you'll see lots of boards for wall drug. And personally, I keep my foot on the pedal and go right past wall drug. But, I've got nothing against tourist establishments. It's just, not a place I like to go. If you like to go there, all the more power to you. But here, remember, the Dakotas, North Dakota and South Dakota, are very interesting because these states were settled in a very short amount of time. And here we have population January 1st, 1878, only 400 people. Population January 1st, 1881, 2,800. Wow, everybody was just flocking to Sioux Falls. I mean, look at this. We have a lot of city blocks that are designated and streets, but no structures in them. Very intriguing. And the reason I show Sioux Falls is because it is an example of a city that seems to be designated without any structures. All the blocks are already there. And so it reinforces that notion, that theory, that these were really just real estate planning posters or maps, or however you want to look at them. But were the buildings that were shown on these maps accurate, or were they not? And, you usually get some of the schools, and that's what they'll try to tell you, and none of the more elaborate buildings because they haven't been constructed yet. None of those incredible courthouses that are made out of whatever cool red granite or whatever we're calling the stone behind them today. Oh, yes, we feature a public school in this one too, just like we did with Austin, Minnesota, because why not? But look at this. Library of Congress. I can't really even make out this entry date. That almost looks like a 2 to me. Is that a typo of some sort? Am I not seeing it right? Well, you look at it yourself and let me know if you come up with something different on that date with when this one was entered into the Library of Congress. It's rather baffling. Just another mystery on top of mysteries, but remember, there are no mysteries. Let's go back to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Minneapolis is another one of those stories of a city that just seemed to crop up or was pulled out of the asses of the people that settled the area in a very short amount of time. The story behind it is they had a lot of timber. Yes, they had a lot of timber, but they made a lot of buildings, such as the City Hall, which still stands to this day, out of some kind of incredible stone. Oh, yes, and here's your futuristic Blade Runner building right here. Yes. And another one right next to it. But yeah, if you ever watched Little House on the Prairie, which was set in Minnesota, albeit filmed in California, which is why you have a mountain that's featured in one story there, even though there are no mountains in Minnesota. The closest thing you have is that drop off to Duluth. Yet you look at Minneapolis, and you can go back and look at the Minneapolis exploration, and just see how extensive this impressive city is. Mighty churches, incredible buildings, and they don't seem to be made out of wood, they're made out of some sort of stone. Granite, sandstone, limestone, as far as the eye can see. Even as far as the eye can see on this bird's eye view map. Now, once again, I ask the question, is this how it really looked at the time that it was purported to have been done? Oh, yes, and they do include the population counts here. And here, you can just look at it. The most prosperous city in the United States. 1865, it was 8,000. And not 27 years later, let me make sure I'm counting right. Yeah, 1865 to 1885, that's 20. 92, that's 27 years. 3 years short of 30 years. They went from 8,000 people to 200,000 people. Now, does that make any sense from a logistics perspective? The population growth. But let's just be generous here. Let's suppose that maybe there's a discrepancy. Maybe there really were more people there. Even if you had 200,000 people already present at 1865, how exactly do you explain a very small town of 8,000 building all this infrastructure, filling every single block? And when you look at this bird's eye map, you'll see that these are some extensive structures. These are not slouches. I mean, look at this. This little dome with this cupola on top of it. And it's everywhere. All these structures with all these little domes and these spires and these antennas. Every single block. All this was just confabulated in 27 years? How? How could anybody do this today? Let's not even talk about these ridiculous churches that are everywhere, along with all these other buildings. And this is what they're trying to convince us happened with the bird's eye view map alone. So yes, if you just take it at face value, I suppose you could accept it. Oh, by the way, we're not even looking at St. Paul. That's the other part of the Twin Cities, the city that's just east of Minneapolis. We're just looking at Minneapolis here. Because remember, in St. Paul, they've got that very impressive state capitol. Granted, they hadn't built it yet, but they had other things that they were building, the other state capitals that they had built. But yeah, why would it be any problem? All these incredible structures. And who did this one? Published by A.M. Smith. Copyrighted 1891 by A.M. Smith. Who the heck's A.M. Smith? Well, Hennepin looks like that's actually in Minneapolis. Well, gee, why didn't they get that crew out of Wisconsin, in Madison? Very, very odd, wouldn't you say? But look at this back here. You have all these incredible structures back here. I mean, is this just decorating the map, or is this what it really looked like? It's very, very strange, and it's hard to reconcile it. Now, let's go to the real piece of resistance before we close this exploration. So the main theme behind this is that these bird's eye view maps really were breaking down the downtown areas of these cities that were in existence. And they were designed to convey the impression that these were the actual structures that were there at the year assigned. But you can find records that will indicate that all these bird's eye view maps were entered into the Library of Congress on the same dates. It's very strange. It's just a small group of dates. But again, I'll let you do your own research and come to your own conclusions on it. I'm merely pointing out some of the details that you can look at. Because maybe you don't want to believe it, or maybe you don't want to consider it, and that's perfectly fine. But one of the most telling things that I think about is going back to Dubuque, Iowa. Now, Dubuque, Iowa is certainly not a significant city today. It's one of those cities in Iowa that's on the Mississippi River. And it tends to be overlooked today. I mean, there's not even an interstate that runs through it. So obviously it's not significant. Highway 20 runs through it. But, if there's not an interstate running through it, then what's the big deal? And you may recall, and you can go back and watch this little exploration, the Great Walls of Iowa. In Dubuque, Iowa, we have a bird's eye view map from 1889 and one from 1872. This is the one from 1872. Now, why do they have two bird's eye view maps for Dubuque? One in 1872 and one in 1889. And the other question I have is, if it was this easy just to produce a bird's eye view map, then why weren't these cities producing one every single year? I mean, think about it. If we could build all these incredible buildings in a very short amount of time, many in less than a year, some in months, then certainly we could produce a bird's eye view map, one per year, for every one of these cities that were designated as significant, could we not? Would that not be the very definition of well-documented history? But yet we have two for Dubuque. Curiously, the two that we have for Dubuque, we don't really see the great retaining walls. We see some indications of them here. But it's very, very odd, and this is the earlier one. This is the 1872, but then we flip over here to the 1889, just 17 short years later, and we see more of the detail of these incredible retaining walls. Now, you may recall that I was actually on site here and walked through the hole that had been cut somehow through this retaining wall. Yeah, what a laugh that is. And then they actually had this funicular railway, funicular, and all these incredible houses, some of which are still there. So yes, who actually built these retaining walls? Who filled them in? Was it just that they weren't drawn in? There's illusions that they were constructed in the 1880s, but is that true? Or again, is this very definitive evidence that someone is really trying to convince us that we know who built those retaining walls, that we know exactly when they were put in there? And it is very significant because it's actually shown on these bird's eye view maps. And this is official history because this is preserved by the Library of Congress. So what gives? If we're saying if this is the official history, why are there so many discrepancies? Why were there so many contractors on these bird's eye view maps? What do they really mean? Well, you can come to your own conclusions, but my theory is simply to convince us that these structures were present at the time that we're told that they were present. And perhaps to really reinforce the notion that, yes, we are responsible and we understand exactly how these incredible cities and towns grew up in such a short amount of time. We put the population numbers down there at the bottom, and you will accept exactly what happened. Granted, who's building a city anywhere today? Who's even building a town today? With all the technology that we have, with all the logistics and infrastructure, modern highways, interstates, air travel, massive ships, all technological capabilities that we did not have in the 1800s. And yet these bird's eye view maps, all produced from the 1800s, they convince us, or act to convince us, that yes, we could do all these things in the 1800s, despite not having the technology that we do today. Really not even having heavy machinery for the most part, if you look at the official history on that. Although, as we've talked about, that's rather difficult to understand as well because we have conflicting accounts. But what are your thoughts on the bird's eye view maps? Thanks for joining me, Prime Explorers. I hope you appreciated this exploration.